Global warming is caused by the depletion of the ozone layer, which is the protective layer that shields the Earth from the violent solar rays. Because of the amount of greenhouse gases that we emit, this layer is thinning out, causing direct exposure to solar heat and rays, which is making our Earth literally melt. The Arctic ice is predicted to reduce by 10 to 20%. This change accelerates global warming as the sun will be absorbed by darker ocean surfaces, so the cycle continues. This will also greatly impact the Arctic ecosystems. Winters will be warmer, precipitation increases up to 20%, and access to Arctic resources will be affected: fish, seals, oil, and mineral reserves. Slowing down climate change is vital for our ecosystem to survive. Reducing our use of greenhouse gases and CFCs very soon is needed. We have to implement energy-efficient buildings with increased use of renewable resources such as wind and solar power. And what would a global warming project be without a classic polar bear and small ice picture? Thank you.
Climate models are used to make quantitative projections of future climate change under different scenarios for greenhouse gas emissions. The concept of climate modeling was introduced by the British physicist Louis Fry Richardson in 1922. His vision, however, was not realized until the later years of the 20th century, with the advent of supercomputers. The most complex climate models are global circulation models, which simulate the physics and chemistry of the global climate system, including atmospheric patterns, the effects of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, along with the changes in climate variables such as rainfall and sea level rise. The climate models may be conservative in their predictions because of the uncertainty of greenhouse gas emissions. As an example, here is a graph of the sea level rise on the left showing projection in gray. All models have their limits for their modeling complex systems. However, all models improve over time, and with increasing sources of real-world information such as satellites, the output of climate models can be constantly refined to increase their power and usefulness. Climate models have already predicted many of the phenomena for which we now have empirical evidence. In conclusion, climate models form a reliable guide to potential climate change.
Decarbonization. So, what is it? Well, D is the removal, and carbonization refers back to carbon. So essentially, it's the process of decreasing the carbon production and emissions by developing technological innovations to create a more sustainable future. But where does most of the CO2 come from? Well, there are many sources, but today we'll be discussing two. Cars and trucks are continuously burning natural gas to function, producing CO2. Short-term solution is bike stations, where this will encourage bike owners to use them without losing them. The long-term solution is the hydrogen fuel cell car, similar to the London cabs, clean and efficient. Another long-term solution is public transportation with convenient stops close to cities and towns. The waste handling system produces a lot of CO2. Short-term solution is pay-as-you-go system, where each family member must pay for their own waste generated. A long-term solution is the pneumatic waste collection system, where containers are linked to piping systems connected to the collection stations. This forces the public to separate their waste. Now remember, these innovations do have an impact on our carbon footprint.
Atmospheric CO2 has reached 404 parts per million, causing shifts in global temperatures and adverse environmental impacts such as drought, flooding, wildfires, and weather changes worldwide. Protecting our environment's ability to absorb carbon will become crucial to mitigate the impacts of climate change and sustain a living environment for our future generations. Carbon sequestration is the process by which carbon is absorbed and released by natural processes. Forests can absorb up to 30% of the world's anthropogenic CO2 emissions. Forests are under threat from clear-cutting for agriculture and unsustainable logging practices for timber. According to the World Wildlife Fund, 46 to 58,000 square miles of forest are lost each year. Protecting forests through repurposing, reusing, and recycling existing infrastructure and material is essential to protecting forests worldwide. Using the waste from one project can be used as the raw materials for a new project. Taking a cradle-to-cradle approach will enhance the ability of forests to sequester carbon and minimize the impacts of climate change.
A warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture in the air, drawing moisture from the earth and changing precipitation levels. Furthermore, reduced snowfalls on mountain ranges could lead to less inflow in rivers and reservoirs. This could lead to an increased frequency of prolonged droughts around the world, including developed nations such as the United States and Australia, and would compromise agriculture and drinking water supplies. Mega droughts could put entire populations at risk and impose severe restrictions on daily life. This could have lasting economic impacts in affected areas and lead to unprecedented migrations of people in developing countries that do not have the infrastructure to distribute water to affected areas. These climate refugees could put enormous pressure on the infrastructure and social structures of accommodating cities. The U.S. Department of Energy states that water consumption in the construction sector was an average of 39.6 billion gallons of water per day in 2005. Several architectural approaches could reduce water consumption by buildings in the most affected areas. These include passive and active systems and the selection of materials that utilize less water in their production, as well as responsive design.
Passive design is a way of building that uses architecture itself to maximize energy performance. The building's relationship to the local microclimate is important in order to achieve passive heating, cooling, lighting, and ventilation. The end goal in passive design is to eliminate the need for electric lights, air conditioning, heaters, or fans, any mechanism that runs on fossil fuels. An example of a passive heating strategy is putting consideration into the orientation of the building to maximize the solar geometry and to get solar heating, as well as having much thicker windows to retain all of that heat, and shutters that can be opened during the day to let the heat in and closed at night to retain it. Passive design is synonymous with discomfort, but that's not necessarily the case. Passive design explores a range of temperatures, relative humidity, and so on in order to determine the spectrum at which a human being can be comfortable. If done cleverly, the use of passive design can help maintain our hedonistic lifestyle.
A personal carbon footprint is the total amount of greenhouse gases produced to directly and indirectly support your own lifestyle. To live a sustainable lifestyle, the goal is to have a very low carbon footprint. The carbon footprint of a nation is comprised of the sum of its citizens' personal footprints, and in order for developed nations to reduce their footprints, the concept of personal carbon trading was introduced. The idea of personal carbon trading has three main components: tradable energy quotas, domestic tradable quotas, and personal carbon allowances. Each component has the same principle. Individuals have a quota for carbon emissions, and any excess must be traded on open market. For example, countries with higher emissions purchase the right to release more emissions from countries that have lower emissions. This system is controlled by outside bodies. Another way of being allowed to produce more emissions than your quota is to invest in a carbon offset. For example, a company that has exceeded their quota in emissions can invest in offset programs such as reforestation and will receive carbon credits that allow them to continue exceeding their quota. Carbon use and credits are kept track of by carbon cards that are used when purchasing fuel and other sources of greenhouse gas emissions. 1 carbon credit is equal to 1 ton of emission reduction.
Equity in climate change. Who suffers? Who to be blamed of? Climate change also includes an inequitable and immoral situation, since most of the world's poorest countries will suffer greatly from its impacts, even though they have contributed little to the problem, because they are historically low emitters of carbon pollution. Examples of this disproportionate impact include Maldives affected by rising sea level, Africa thrust into hunger and drought, as well as spreading diseases. Underdeveloped countries are harmed the most. The industries that rely heavily on agriculture, forestry, and tourism are the direct impact. We also need to know the other side of the problem. Other countries cannot escape the impacts, for example, rising sea level, agriculture region in China and the United States. The suggested solutions are listed below, though saluting the main dilemma, balancing compensated lifestyle and increasing demand, is the most essential.
Climate change is predicted to have an enormous economic impact on the world over the next decades. According to Stern Review, costs of climate change will result in a loss of at least 5 to 20% of global GDP each year. This would have serious impact on global development. Alternatively, cost of action can be limited to about 1% of global GDP each year. Action is necessary to lower the impending costs of climate change. Climate change policy has expanded around two ideas: mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation is the act of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in order to attack climate change. Adaptation is changing the ways we live in order to adjust to the effects of the changing climate. Economists argue over which might be the most cost-efficient method. However, mitigation and adaptation should not be viewed as alternatives. Both will need to be used. Adaptation is needed for the unavoidable impacts of climate change, while mitigation should be used in the longer term. Strategies to mitigate and adapt to climate change will range from individual to global efforts.
For the last 25 years, the CO2 emissions from most developed countries have been relatively constant. The increase can be seen in the developing world in countries like India and China, who are constantly expanding their economy and requiring more energy to do so. As the economies of countries grow, so do their carbon emissions and demand for energy. Sustainable livelihood in many developing countries is already at risk due to climate conditions and emissions from other countries, so any additional emissions will put these countries in a tough position to easily sustain life. with the International Energy Agency estimating that greenhouse gas emissions will double sometime between now and 2030, the outlook for these countries is not good. Reducing global emissions will be difficult without impairing economic development. DII is set out to use the natural resources of developing countries such as sun and wind to provide sustainable clean energy not only for the countries themselves, but also for the export to other countries, thus creating business opportunities.
In the 20th century, mean sea levels have increased by 0.17 meters as a direct result of climate change. Sea levels are projected to continue at an increasing rate, affecting the 10% of world population that lives in low elevation coastal zones. Consequences of sea level rising directly impacts the livelihoods of human beings. Global climate change has induced increased sea levels through two factors. The first is oceanic expansion. Global warming due to greenhouse gas accumulation has led to heat being trapped in the vast oceans. The second is ice sheet and glacier melting. Ice loss at the poles due to temperature change, specifically in Greenland and Antarctica. With the majority of the world's urban communities located in coastal regions, rising sea levels threatens human infrastructure and natural habitat. Consequences include hazards from storms, tidal flooding, and land submerging. Greater sea levels mean more frequent and more powerful natural disasters.
Climate change also presents many business opportunities. According to the CDP, there is one business opportunity for every 3 climate-related risks. Renewable energy resources and water management technology are among the sectors with a growing market. Individuals and companies can now take advantage of feed-in tariffs and policies, now available in over 40 countries worldwide. After investing privately in renewable energy technology, money can be earned by re-implementing energy back into the public grid. As polar ice sheets continue to melt, one can capitalize on new naval traffic routes. The Northwest Passage allows up to 6,000 miles to be cut from a typical ship's journey. As well, the Arctic Bridge allows a shortcut to be taken. This allows a drastic reduction in fuel consumption and costs.
There are 3 key factors contributing to fuel poverty. The first is the cost of fuel. In Canada, electricity prices have increased 38% in the last decade, and hitting low family incomes the hardest. Second is household income, and third is energy efficiency of home. For example, if your house is very well insulated, the cost of running it for heating will be fairly low. The first figure represents the gasoline prices that increased in Canada versus the United States, with red being Canada and yellow being the United States. The second figure, according to the Fraser Institute, shows that the growth in income in Canada from 1994 till 2013, the graph concludes that the energy prices in Canada has increased faster than income, which causes fuel poverty. Using solar power to generate electricity or to heat water is beneficial because it is a renewable source, unlike fossil fuels, which are finite resources that will eventually run out. This is better for the environment because it does not produce greenhouse gases. One of the ways to reduce fuel poverty is for people to start taking advantage of generating their own energy, such as using solar panels.
Microgeneration refers to the production of heat and electricity on a small scale for individuals, small businesses, or community that uses low-carbon technologies. It harnesses renewable energies such as solar energy, micro-wind, micro-hydro, ground source, and etc. Basically, in a typical microgeneration system that uses solar panel and micro-wind turbines, the turbines and solar modules are connected to different grid-dependent inverters. Then both of the inverters are connected to AC voltage panel, then conducted to utility distribution system and to all AC electrical circuits. Comparing to centralized power generation, microgeneration uses renewable energy technologies, which lowers the environmental carbon footprint. It produces electricity primarily for the consumer's own use, which has a higher level of reliability and more customer control, whereas centralized generation installations are exhausted by insufficient power plants.
A hydrogen economy is an economic model in which energy is drawn from, traded as, and stored as hydrogen gas. Hydrogen in this model is seen ideally as an energy source. However, hydrogen needs to be produced, generally either through the electrolysis of water or from natural gas, and therefore should rather be seen as a means of energy storage. This energy storage capacity is one of the hydrogen economy's definite strengths, especially when it is used in conjunction with renewable energy sources. Another strength is the fact that the model will be easy to implement thanks to the mass distribution infrastructure already in place due to the chemical industry. Despite these benefits, a hydrogen economy is not viable simply because it's uneconomic. It takes more energy to make, to store, and to transport hydrogen than is produced from it. A complete hydrogen economy may therefore not be possible, but its benefits may still be used to supplement the model already in place.
Photovoltaics are the conversion of light into electricity. A property called the photovoltaic effect allows certain materials, most commonly treated crystalline silicon, to absorb light and release their valence electrons, which then creates an electrical current. A solar cell is composed of layers and protective PV and contact material that complete a circuit. In 1839, Edmund Becquerel noted that some materials would produce small electric currents when exposed to light, but it was not put into action until the 1960s with its debut in the space industry. These individual cells are arranged into panels and arrays depending on how much energy is needed, their uses varying from powering watches and batteries, to communities, to spacecraft and satellites. Non-renewable energy, while cheap and familiar, is detrimental to the Earth and its inhabitants. PV and other renewable energy systems cut down the cost and efficiency lost from transporting energy to remote communities. They do not rely on our depleting non-renewable resources to generate power, and do not produce pollution or waste. The challenge of today is to change the way we live to be more sustainable and responsible.
Many of us consider electricity as a clean, low-emission source of energy. It is important, however, to acknowledge the fact that 41% of the globe's electricity is still derived from coal. With coal prices making a comeback and increasing usage of coal for energy in developing Asian countries, it is important to understand the emissions associated with this energy source. Coal has the highest carbon content of any fossil fuel, making it very unenvironmentally friendly. In 2009, the combustion of coal was responsible for the emission of 12.5 billion tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. Gases like mercury gas and nitrogen oxide, which are harmful to both human health and the environment, are also produced in the combustion of coal. Nitrogen oxide, which forms when nitrogen released in the combustion of coal combines with oxygen in the air, is incredibly harmful to human health. It is linked to many respiratory problems, including inflammation in the airway, and can also lead to acid rain, which kills vegetation and is harmful to a city. We clearly need to rethink the sources of our electricity.
Carbon dioxide is a natural greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. However, the drastic increase of emissions of carbon dioxide has caused many global warming issues. Carbon dioxide storage is one way to reduce the emission of carbon dioxide. The process involves three main steps: capturing, transporting, and storing. Carbon dioxide storage is a technique which limits the emissions of carbon dioxide by storing the emissions in A. underground layers, B. oceans, C. other materials. Pictures on the right are examples of a carbon dioxide storage plant. Although carbon dioxide storage may seem like a great means to reduce emission of carbon dioxide, there are limits. Geological storage requires a better understanding of long-term storage, migration, and leakage processes. Ocean storage requires studies of the response of biological systems. Clarification is needed regarding potential legal constraints.
The discovery of fission in the early 20th century remains the key role in nuclear energy today. There was a constant scientific interest and confidence. This replied for the need of weapons in World War II and the Cold War, transportation, and general electricity for the public. Nuclear waste was disposed of either on-site or in a location nearby. Nuclear power generated today involves uranium-235 or plutonium as base element for fission to occur. Only 3% of electric power is output, while 97% becomes radioactive waste, buried deep underground for storage as the best solution without the risk of earthquakes and radiation leaks. Using thorium-232 decaying to uranium-233 is a new concept for the LFGR. It uses liquid phosphorus salt instead of water as a coolant, 80% of which decaying in the span of 10 years. Since the world is striving to reduce greenhouse gases and nuclear power does not emit any, many countries are investing in the LFGR to be used in the next 20 years.
Biofuels are liquid fuels made from biomass, used in place of or mixed with gasoline and diesel. Biomass is made from organic materials. It's carbon neutral because it uses CO2 for photosynthesis and produces CO2 when burned. Bioethanol from sugary plants like corn make up 2% of gasoline supplies. Biodiesel from oils like soybean oil make up 0.4% of diesel supplies. The extent to which we use biofuels is a function of our land use. Simply put, where do we grow all this biomass? Only 10.8% of the earth is arable land used mainly for food crops. The yields of biomass crop vary. Sugarcane yields 3,000 to 6,000 liters of gasoline equivalent per hectare. Corn yields 1,500 to 3,000 depending on growing conditions. Should our need for fuel displace our land used for food and forest? Other generations of biofuels made from various biomass are being developed, and each has its own pros and cons. Biofuels are the only replacements for transport fuels because combustion engines don't have to be altered to use them. This doesn't mean that we can continue to rely on cars as we do. To live sustainably, we need to pair these advances in biofuel technology with lifestyle changes.
Wind farms are groups of large wind turbines often found in open spaces. Wind turbines convert the kinetic energy caused by the wind into mechanical power. The mechanical energy produced turns generators, converting mechanical energy into electricity. Wind energy is environmentally friendly because it is a renewable source of energy that doesn't produce any waste or pollution. Although it has a high startup cost involving the manufacturing, the operational costs are low. Finally, the land underneath wind farms can be used by farmers and for other uses to save space. Wind is unpredictable, so one can't solely rely on the wind to provide energy. It is also a threat to migratory birds and bats. And the combination of the noise that wind turbines make and the disruption of the natural landscape decreases the home value of houses surrounding wind farms.
Urbanization is happening at an alarming rate. In 2014, 54% of the world's populations resided in urban cities with 3.9 billion inhabitants. People, as they naturally do, need food to survive. However, importing food from rural areas is not a sustainable method of acquiring food. Why is that? A large issue at hand is transport. Due to the distance between rural and urban areas, vehicles travel a long distance to deliver the food. Amongst other problems, the fumes of vehicles contribute to greenhouse gases, the amount of food urban cities consume is large, and the cost of transport is expensive. So, how can we be more sustainable? The solution? Urban agriculture. It is the practice of growing, raising, and distributing food locally, rather than importing it from the rural. This aids with food security, especially on the low-income families, as well as eliminating any transport problems. This way, we can be more sustainable economically as well as environmentally.
Traffic congestion is a key issue driving the rethinking of the way we inhabit and plan our cities. Surprisingly, congestion isn't always a bad thing. Up to a certain point, about 35 hours per commuter per year in delays, traffic has been linked to economic growth. However, past this point, congestion becomes a serious problem, both environmentally and economically. The environmental impact of idling in traffic is obvious, as well as the many health issues associated with it for pedestrians and homeowners. But why does congestion cause the UK to lose £20 billion per year? One reason is simply wasted time. People sitting in their cars in a traffic jam are losing productive time, and productivity is money. How do we solve the problem of congestion? Some possibilities include better urban planning of streets and cycle paths, better public transit systems, the implementation of a gas tax, and stop-free tolls. These methods and policies, like India's National Urban Transport Policy, are paving the way to greener, less congested cities of the future.
Currently, we are facing global environmental challenges which threatens the longevity of our ecosystems. To avoid an ecological collapse, we must develop a vision to design a more ecologically efficient industry. A system that meets the needs and aspirations to a healthier surrounding, integrating nature, technology, and agriculture while continuously reducing our impact on the earth. A concept of an eco-city was formulated by the urban ecology movement. They work to develop the concept of redesigning the urban environment. Plans for a healthier environment include transforming our buildings to be energy efficient, using interconnected transport methods, and creating networks called smart grids to distribute and exchange electricity throughout the eco-city. So, the vision for the eco-city model is to keep a sustainable lifestyle by the rebuilding of our infrastructure. This is a huge endeavor. However, there are countries such as China and Germany implementing new restorative urban development plans. The eco-city will bring forth ecological awareness, creating an environmentally conscious culture.
Flooding is strengthened by the retention of heat of greenhouse gases. Glaciers and ice caps melt in warmer climates, releasing water which causes sea levels to rise. Existing seawater expands in volume under these warm conditions. Flooding is a large concern near low-lying coasts, but also inland near large bodies of water or valleys, where snowmelt or rainfall can be drastic. Tsunamis, storms, rainfall, and snowmelt can cause a flood, which is the most common type of natural disaster. Cities are heavily occupied, impeding proper flow and drainage of water. Sewage systems are easily backed up, and a lack of soil in favor of paved surfaces leaves nowhere for water to infiltrate and seep away. There is extreme economic loss from flooding in an urban environment. Municipalities may depend on federal government. Global warming is not expected to slow down as cities become more and more densely populated. Flooding will become much more frequent and severe as sea levels rise if emissions from the world's major urban centers are not kept under check.
An urban heat island is an area within a city that experiences warmer climates than the neighboring areas. Its effects include changes in cloud, fog, and precipitation patterns to regions up to 60 kilometers downwind of cities. Two of the largest contributors to urban heat islands are human alterations to the land surface and the production of waste heat. The increasing use of surfaces that absorb solar radiation, like dark concrete and asphalt, and the decreasing amount of trees and green spaces are both factors that induce urban heat islands. Along with exhaust from cars, air conditioners, and industry, tall buildings multiply this effect, reflecting heat into the lower streets and preventing cooling by convection. A popular idea that aims to mitigate urban heat islands are garden roofs or lighter colored roofs that can better absorb or reflect sunlight. It should be noted that a pedestrian can only feel this effect when at least 30% of a city's rooftops are affected. Other ideas include the addition of trees or lighted colored asphalt in parking lots or streams of water that are able to absorb the heat from nearby areas.
Our urban footprint, also known as our ecological footprint, is a measure of our human toll on nature. It compares the area of productive land and water ecosystems required to produce the resources that a said population consumes and assimilate the waste that that population produces. In simpler terms, it is a comparison of the supply of the Earth's biocapacity to produce and demand of our consumption of these resources. We measure the footprint in global hectares per capita. This unit defines how many hectares of land or biocapacity a person needs to generate the resources they use. In 2011, there were around 12 billion hectares of biologically productive land and water on Earth, or 1.72 global hectares per person. The average footprint in the same year was of 2.8 global hectares. This difference results in a global resource deficit. This deficit means that we are using Earth's renewable resources faster than it is able to produce them. But this overuse is not found everywhere. Most urbanized and developed parts of the world have a significantly larger urban footprint than those of countries with simpler lifestyles. So, this leaves a task of lightening the stress on our planet more to people in countries like ours, to people like you.
Urbanization is a population shift from rural to urban areas that relies on built environment and technology. Cities developed more and more over the last few decades. The reliance on technology becomes stronger. Vulnerabilities occur with it. Technology problems increase susceptibility and even malicious intervention like terrorist attack. Between 2001 and 2012, almost as many skyscrapers will be constructed as were built in the whole of the 20th century. And since urban transport systems depend so much on technology, populations are easily being disrupted if systems fail. 2003 blackout in North America is an example of this vulnerability. There were 50 million people lost power for up to 2 days in this biggest blackout. The event contributed to at least 11 deaths and cost an estimated 6 billion Canadian dollars.
The whole world is experiencing rapid urbanization, where in total of 3.7 billion people are living in urban areas, which is expected to double by 2050. In contrast, the population of small towns is decreasing at an alarming rate. Urbanization is mainly caused by industrial and technology development. Urbanization allows for fast development of technology, economic growth, as well as cultural development. It was shown that large cities generate much higher GDP than small towns. Furthermore, urbanization allows more people to have easy access to hospitals and other services. There are some negative sides to urbanization, which are mostly environment-related. Social growth demands for more fuel and energy to fuel its technological advancement, as well as to meet the needs of its population. Fossil fuel and coal, which are very harmful towards the environment, are most commonly used as a source of energy, especially in developing nations.
Across the world,
Cities attract people economically, socially, and culturally. Urbanization refers to the movement or the migration of people from rural areas to cities. Increasingly, over half of the world's population lives in urban areas and benefit from a higher life expectancy, literacy rates, better education, and quality of life. Cities attract people from small towns and rural areas. The major pull factors today are job opportunities, healthcare facilities, better education, and food availability. The main push factors are resource shortage, lack of food security, and low productivity gains in agriculture. Improved literacy in urban areas allow for more people to be reached through the media and can participate in their communities and government. However, as cities continue to draw people in, this puts a huge pressure on resources and the environment. Incoming migrants may be faced with inadequate jobs, low-quality housing, and a lack of services.
Communities in urban cities are extremely multicultural. Both the United States of America and Canada are founded on immigration. Their values and social fabric are built by immigrants. More than 200 ethnic origins reside in Canada. This multiculturalism helps the growth, urbanization, and well-being of a city. In the city of Toronto, the population consists of 20% of all immigrants in Canada. 50% of Toronto's population was born outside of Canada. Diverse cultures stimulate creativity, bringing innovative theater, film, art, dance, music, fashion, food, and home away from home. These opportunities help stimulate diverse social interactions. In contrast, gated communities control the movements of people into and out of the area. They are sought after due to the sense of security, exclusivity, and predictability. Approximately 6 to 9 million Americans live in these communities. Fencing residents from a larger community results in a retreat from community engagement and responsibility.
In 2010, the UN recognized that access to water is a human right. In addition, the water should be safe, sufficient, physically accessible, and affordable to everyone. This means that the source of the water should not be further than 1,000 meters from home. The cost of the water should not exceed 3% of household income, and the time needed to collect the water should not exceed 30 minutes. Even though it is now a right, many countries are failing to take the necessary steps to ensure the right to water is recognized. A political crisis is occurring where water is distributed unequally and unfairly, determined by money, power, and influence. An average person in Europe, for example, used more than 20 times more water each day than an average person in Mozambique. So how is water distributed? In Canada, we have two major systems for the use of water. The first, called prior allocation, is used in BC and the Plains provinces and gives the foremost rights to the first landowner to use the water in the system. The second, called riparian law, is used by Ontario and the Maritimes and states that the owner of property next to the body of water gets the rights to use it.
Water consciousness. As shown in the chart, developed countries' water withdrawal and consumption increasing rate is slowing down for the past decade due to the rise of water consciousness. However, as in the developing countries, water stress is still too high, and it is imminent for those countries to higher their awareness in order to achieve sustainable development. Numerous effort has been put into raising water consciousness. Annual Global Water Summit is used to advocate more efficient water usage and to raise the awareness of the importance of water. Factors affecting rates of consumption and withdrawal of water including population density, water distribution, and environmental awareness. Besides education, technology is an effective method to elevate consciousness regarding usage of water. For example, one of the most famous achievements in the world is Israel water purification process. This allows Israel to utilize water more effectively and also provide an incredible opportunity for those countries that are in high water tension.
Just by looking at the world's 20 largest megacities as categorized by GreenBiz, we see that 14 are experiencing water scarcity and drought conditions on a massive scale. But as the world's population increases and technological advancements remain on the rise, the deficiency of waterless design could stun business growth, limit production capabilities, and complicate everyday life. But where do we start? Cities like Vancouver have introduced water-wise landscapes, where a series of guidelines provide practical advice on creating more plant life, making buildings sustainable, and reducing the use of clean drinking water for irrigation. These guidelines aim to reduce the urban heat island effect, maintenance efforts and costs, strain on the local infrastructure, and more. Luckily, changes are happening. Nestle broke ground in 2013 when they reduced their water use by almost 2/3 in less than 12 months through the use of a more efficient closed refrigeration loop system. The other change, used by other companies as well, is the reassessment of the minimum water amounts needed for evaporation and condensation processes.
Between 500,000 and 4 million people scavenge for a living in marginalized communities in Latin America. Scavenging, or waste picking, is the process of sorting through garbage for recyclables. For many people, mostly families or micro-enterprises such as women, children, and elderly, this is a reasonably secure profession that also reduces the need for a landfill and saves natural resources. There are negatives to this enterprise because the work is physically taxing and workers are exposed to things such as pathogens, falling debris, rabid animals, fecal matter, body parts, and used syringes. In the past few years, many organizations and waste picker cooperatives have started to stand up for waste pickers' rights to be recognized as part of the workforce. This includes getting worker benefits. In terms of the environment, waste pickers play a key role in countries where a landfill system is not in place. In Brazil, 100,000 people earn their living by collecting aluminum cans, which enabled their country to recycle 89% of them in 2003, which was the highest rate in the world. Cities need to respect waste pickers and their rights because of the positive impact they have on the environment.
Industrial symbiosis. It is an exchange between two or more industries where the waste of one becomes a new resource of the other. The main idea is that one man's trash is another man's treasure. In this photo, there are multiple different types of companies. They all form a partnership based on the exchange of different wastes, and the waste eventually becomes a new resource. The effects of industrial symbiosis. Advantages. It can help companies reduce material costs and CO2 emissions, earn new revenue, and open new business opportunities for companies. However, with every good idea, there are disadvantages, such as lack of trust and awareness in this idea, and it's difficult for companies to keep a long-term working relationship. NISP. It's a national network that sets up relationships of exchange between companies. This program has reduced 6 million tons of greenhouse gases over 5 years. They are also expanding all over Canada, including Vancouver, all the way to Halifax. There are many ongoing industrial symbiosis Canadian projects, such as exchanges between the Stratford Association and the Green Enterprise.
Waste to energy is a process by which energy from garbage is recovered and converted into heat or electricity. While the most common process of incineration directly produces CO2, carbon savings come from the offsetting of methane emissions that would have been released if the waste had gone to a landfill, since methane is 21% more potent as a greenhouse gas than CO2. The process of incineration is similar to any other steam turbine method of energy generation, the difference here being that the fuel is garbage instead of coal or natural gas. The waste is burned and the heat is used to create steam, which spins a turbine, therefore generating electricity. What's left of the waste is either ash, which goes to the landfill, or poisonous flue gases, which must be treated before being released from the facility. Modern incineration methods can reduce waste to less than 5% of its original volume, and are proven to be cleaner than coal-fired plants. However, while incineration of trash is a very logical and eco-friendly solution to reducing landfills and greenhouse emissions, there is still plenty of concern from the public who are unconvinced that emissions are safe and fear that it would kill recycling initiatives.
Waste minimization is often referred to as a process which aims to decrease the production of waste within a society. Governments develop policies to eliminate the generation of harmful and persistent waste in an effort to promote a more sustainable society. Most governments use the waste hierarchy, where focus is placed on waste reduction and prevention. However, most countries fail to reduce their waste. That is, consumption remains the same, so more focus is given to recycling as their primary way of reducing the production of waste. Studies found show that an average North American produces 1.8 kilograms of waste per day. Waste minimization can be achieved by either changing the manufacturing process or reducing consumption. Industries can now make products such as steel thinner with the advancements of technology. Waste minimization can also be achieved at a household level. This can be practiced with the reuse of products and also by composting organic materials into rich soil.
In 1947, worldwide hazardous waste generation is estimated to have been only 5 million metric tons. Today, industrialized nations producing 90% of the world's hazardous waste generate between 300 and 400 million metric tons of hazardous waste annually. During recent years, the combined efforts of international environmental groups, mass media, and other organizations have created an awareness of the problem. Thanks to these efforts, many countries have banned the importation of hazardous waste. Nevertheless, the flow of hazardous waste to developing countries continues. The global regime governing the movement of toxic waste across borders must be strengthened if not complete ban be put on the international movement of waste to less developed countries. But the most preferred and effective way of tackling the problem is reduction of the waste generation in the first place.
Nutraceutical, a combination of the words nutrition and pharmaceutical, is an umbrella term used to describe any food or part of a food that offers a medical or health benefit in addition to the basic nutritional value it has. They are used to promote general well-being, and many people believe this approach is more natural than using prescription drugs. Such benefits may include the prevention or treatment of disease. These products range from pure compounds to foods that contain added biologically active ingredients. The nutraceuticals business has experienced tremendous growth over the past few years and is currently estimated to exceed $65 billion a year in global sales. However, there are also some drawbacks to using these products. They are not regulated by the FDA, meaning that manufacturers are not required to prove their product's safety and effectiveness. They may contain more, less, or none of the actual effective ingredient, and they can also react with prescription drugs, causing harm to consumers.
Urban informatics is the study, design, and practice of using data and technology to better understand the needs of citizens in their respective urban environment and infrastructure. This understanding is crucial in solving smaller issues pertaining to the everyday lives of citizens, i.e. faster passport/driver's license processing, to large-scale topics like citywide emergency preparedness. Urban informatics works in 5 steps. Using CUSP's example of traffic congestion, they are data collection from cameras at major intersections, integrate and manage collected data with pre-existing data from taxis, analyze and interpret the data to eliminate excess information, develop and implement a solution, and finally monitor and evaluate the outcomes to ensure your solution is effective. Why you should care. By definition, urban informatics strive to make everyday urban life more efficient, livable, and equitable. Through apps such as Fix My Street, citizens have a direct method of communication with authorities and planners in their communities. As more and more of these initiatives are conceived, cities become increasingly personalizable, open, connected, and collaborative.
Global monitoring is a continuous analytical sampling of air, water, soil, and various biodata from around the world in order to survey the surrounding environment. Samples and information extracted from global monitoring are used in conjunction with one another to create a vivid picture of the current state of planet Earth. Global monitoring can be assessed manually on Earth's surface, such as GEMS water sampling, or aerial documentation from the sky, such as NASA's surface currents from diagnostics, and the Orbiting Carbon Observatory, which accurately measures and maps daily ocean surface currents, as well as Earth's carbon dioxide sources and sinks from satellites orbiting an atmosphere. Global monitoring is an essential aspect of the regulatory inventory check of the natural resources on Earth. Global monitoring also allows us to recognize the destructive consequences of human interaction on the planet, and to simultaneously educate present and future generations on society's role and responsibility to protect the Earth.
Nathan D. Wolf has done research on how a pathogen that is only transmitted between animals manages to transfer itself to a pathogen that can only be transferred through humans. And these stages are merging, which is very dangerous. Major infectious diseases in temperate and tropical zones often originate in Asia, Africa, and Europe. For example, hunters in Africa are often exposed to possible transmissions, one butchering wild animals, and these viruses can spread easier due to the lack of natural quarantines with today's increased mobility. Globalization has led to the spread of health data so that organizations like Global Viral can examine the blood samples from hunted animals, reports of suspicious animal or human deaths in viral hotspots, to attempt to take measures against leaps of viruses from animal to human.
Biomimicry, as the word states, is the utilization of various biological advancements present today to approach solutions for complicated problems. Since nature has done many trial and error until today, it is a very sophisticated approach to mimic nature for human problems. Biomimicry actually takes a large part in our lives today. A good example would be Velcro. The inventor of Velcro realized that the numerous tiny hooks on seed birds were hard to disconnect, arriving to the conclusion that the tiny hooks on Velcro is comparable to the force made by the metal zippers, making them as sufficient and as efficient as possible. When biomimicry comes to architecture, there are numerous possibilities for the architect. One method is to make use of the functioning systems in nature. An example is the Eastgate Center in Zimbabwe, which employed the natural cooling system of termites, creating a very environmentally friendly building which used less power on air conditioning.
Infinite content refers to the exponential growth of user-generated content being added to the internet. The global internet population has grown to 3.4 billion users, and every minute of the day Americans use 18 million megabytes of wireless data. We can draw insight by applying computer analytics to the ever-growing amounts of information that we are constantly generating, sharing, and expressing to enhance our lives. In medicine, the study of databases of drug interactions and patient responses have found that medicines have applications for other than what they were designed for. In business, real-time analytics are using the technology to do everything from predict when machines will fail to determining immediate public reactions on social media. In human thought, Google's artificial intelligence can answer your questions before we even think of them based on our social data. By 2020, our accumulated digital universe of data will grow from 4.4 zettabytes today to around 44 zettabytes. If all of that data is analyzed instead of just the 0.5% used now, then just imagine the potential for the evolution of the entire human race. Infinite content denotes the world of opportunities to communicate and improve the lives of a large portion of the entire human race.
We want to know how much traffic we'll hit when we leave home in the morning, or where we'll be able to stop for food along the way, or if the package that we ordered the other day has shipped yet. Now we can do all of this very quickly and easily because of a technology called location awareness, which very simply allows us to determine the physical location of an object. This can be done through three main channels: GPS satellites, cell towers, and Wi-Fi networks. And while the potentials of location awareness are constantly evolving, it has been used to track the migration patterns of animals. It serves as the basis for apps like Uber and Pokemon Go, and Google uses it for their popular Times feature. While location awareness lets us know where things are, it also lets someone know where we are. By virtue of having a cell phone with a SIM card and access to Wi-Fi, we have the potential to be tracked. Now the question arises, who is collecting this data, what are they using it for, and is it secure?
The goal of artificial intelligence, or AI, is to mimic the most intricate system known to man, the human brain, creating a computer mind that can think, learn, grow, reason, and communicate like a human. AI already exists in simple forms such as Apple Siri or Facebook Friend suggestions, where its job is just to compute a single task, which has been found to be very useful. But full artificial intelligence has yet to be achieved. In fact, many people fear AI. Stephen Hawking explains it, suggesting it could ruin human mankind. Because AI could redesign itself at a never-ending rate to a point where humans just could not keep up. Since artificial intelligence has yet to be achieved, we are unsure if computer intelligence exceeding us would be helpful or not. So then comes the question, can a machine think? Yes, the technology of simple artificial intelligence we have today is rapidly improving and useful to our everyday lives, but all the tools we have today rely on us humans to provide data for the computer to react to. So the ethical question persists: should we continue exploring this field of artificial intelligence?
Precision therapy, often referred to as precision medication, is a form of treatment designed to better suit the individual in regards to their genetics, environment, and lifestyle. A convergence between the technological and healthcare sectors has begun establishing a health database to analyze the commonalities between people of similar genetic and lifestyle disposition. This results in individualized treatment options and a stronger overall healthcare system. Humans have 46 chromosomes comprised of 3 billion letters of DNA code known as the human genome. New technology allows mapping of the human genome to occur inexpensively and in a span of a few days. Therefore, precision medicine idealizes that every patient could have their specific cancer sequenced. And this is really important because by understanding each sequence helps scientists to uncover unique mutations, resulting in major medical and therapeutic implications. Of course, this technology comes with challenges. How are we going to protect and store all of the data? Who's going to pay for the mappings? But the possibility remains for this strategy to treat common illnesses while updating our current healthcare model for diagnosis, monitoring, and therapy. In theory, personalized medicine can work like Netflix. Using data and analytics, maybe cures will finally come out like movie recommendations do.
The Internet of Things is a proposed development of the Internet in which everyday objects have network connectivity, allowing them to send and receive data. Everything from people to buildings to cars will be provided with unique identifiers and the ability to transfer data over a network without requiring human-to-human or human-to-computer interaction. Current examples include home automation, which is also known as smart home devices, such as the control and automation of lighting, heating and air conditioning systems, and appliances such as washer and dryers or refrigerators that use Wi-Fi for remote monitoring. Some areas for future application would be in medical and healthcare, transportation, and manufacturing. The Internet of Things creates the opportunity for more direct integration of the physical world into computer-based systems, resulting in improved efficiency, accuracy, and economic benefit. The reality is that the Internet of Things allows for virtually endless opportunities and connections to take place, many of which we can't even think of or fully understand today.
Transmedia architecture has to do with the trending technology of virtual reality, and with it, the advancement of virtual architecture. With different virtual systems such as Minecraft, Grand Theft Auto, Sims, and more, the participant begins to create and develop a second habitat in the virtual realm. The virtual architecture in these realms begins to have an impact on the genuine reality of the individual and the spaces of their primary habitat. With the adaptability of the virtual world, the question arises of whether people will come to expect the same behavior of their physical spaces. With this comes great potential for designers who can use these technologies with live users to prototype different designs and receive instant feedback. The development of virtual technologies and the trend towards more digital-dependent design work may see a drastic change in the required skill set for future architects.
Open innovation is a new approach to generating ideas in the 21st century. Up until recently, most innovation took place solely within the research and development department of a company. Now, open innovation allows those outside the company to help work on a project. The concept being there's more intellectual capital outside the company rather than inside, which means more ideas and innovation can occur. Climate change addresses many different problems, which means we need many more solutions. With open innovation, companies and universities allow the public to get involved, often by proposing contests with cash prizes. This means the company has a large pool of ideas from which it can choose the best ones to develop, and the public gets involved with shaping their future. Since 2007, MIT has been working on its Center for Collective Intelligence through its series of online contests, in which over 2,000 proposals have been submitted. Topics range from energy use to urban studies. Winners of the contest have the opportunity to present their ideas to policymakers, investors, and experts. The CoLab is an example of ordinary citizens making an impact in our world today.
Self-surveillance is about collecting data about one's personal behavior in order to obtain a greater understanding of one's own lifestyle. Researchers discreetly monitor people's behaviors in order to obtain information for their research. If someone realizes that they are being observed by someone they deem relative, they will change the way they behave in order to conform to what they believe they should be doing. This reaction is called the Hawthorne effect. With the help of technology and social media, the popularity of self-surveillance is growing drastically. In modern times, people can virtually track and monitor anything in their lives with the help of technology. Furthermore, people are motivated to live an according lifestyle and make educated decisions when visually presented with a comparison of their daily lifestyle to an ideal lifestyle observation graph. Self-surveillance is not always directed to oneself, but also how people interact and affect their surroundings. As well, visual aids caused by the advancement in technology causes a Hawthorne effect. This can greatly help with the conservation of the environment with the help of programs such as PEIR, where users can track and see how they impact the Earth, because it will motivate people to make educated decisions when it comes to the environment.
Collaborative consumption is an emerging system of products and services usage by more than one owner. This is now a system of paying for usage instead of ownership. This includes person-to-person lending, swapping, renting, bartering, and sharing. Products no longer should be made for the expected short usage time of one person who will throw away the item at the end of their necessity for the item. A person who wants or needs your item will be able to get it without buying and therefore asking for the production of the item to be produced unnecessarily. Some examples of companies that already employ such systems for their businesses and are widely used are Airbnb, Zipcar, FreeCycle, Kijiji, and Clothing Exchange. These companies require and produce a trust between people who use their services, and in a way feel a stronger sense of community of like-minded people.
Have you ever used the internet to diagnose yourself when something was off and ended up convincing yourself that you must have some rare disease? Conducting a Google search of our symptoms instead of going to see a doctor is becoming increasingly popular because the internet is less expensive and more accessible. Healthcare organizations are noticing and want to make these new trends safer and have information on the internet be made more readily available and accurate.
The problem is that it's too easy for Dr. Google to convince us that we're ill. The information we find can be misleading or misinterpreted. If more doctors embrace technology and fill the internet with accurate forums on health and medicine, more people will be able to trust what they learn about their symptoms, and communicating with a doctor online will become more common. The internet is still only a tool to help us understand a bit more about ourselves, and we should always discuss our options with a doctor before coming to any conclusions. We must use the internet wisely and approach our doctors politely instead of using them as a second opinion, suggesting unfitting treatments, and harming our doctor-patient relationship. Remember, only a trained professional can diagnose a condition properly.
Through various companies, the science of genetic sequencing has come to the mass population. The benefits of such testing is the ability to recognize inherited health conditions, identify genetic risks, as well as offer medicine and treatment options that are personally tailored. Mass gene sequencing also allows for faster development and research of genetic disorders. Privacy becomes a major concern as the disclosure of genetic test results can be a requirement in certain situations. This has caused discrimination from certain employers and insurance companies, ranging from increased rates, denial of services, and even termination of employment. The privacy issue has caused stigma of these tests, even with the positive benefits of personalized genetic sequencing. In Canada, the answer is Bill S-201. It is currently in its second reading in Parliament as of September this year and is called the Genetic Non-Discrimination Act. This will prohibit anyone to require testing or to disclose the results of any genetic test. The Act encourages the continued development and use of genetic tests by protecting the privacy of the results.
Cybercrime uses programming, encoding, and decoding by means of the internet or telecommunication networks to endanger households, businesses, and governments. There is a recent shift from small groups of criminals to larger networks of international cybercriminals. As society continues to be dependent on technology, we are providing more means and digitized information to be stolen or sold anonymously by criminals on the dark net. Whether it is the loss of money, encryption of data, or illegally transmitted files, cybercrime has major impacts on the economy and politics. 1 to 17% of the population may be affected by digital threat in their lifetime. It is important to be educated on the risks of cybercrime and the many ways in which you can prevent it from happening in your professional and personal life.
You're waiting for the subway. The train swoops into the station and the doors open. People fall out, unconscious, gargling and choking on blood. Others push past holding handkerchiefs against their face. You pass out. Bioterrorism is the use of chemicals or bacteria to harm others. In this case, it occurred in Tokyo, Japan using sarin nerve gas. There are 3 categories in categorizing various harmful agents. In Category A are agents that have a high death rate and are highly transmittable. Category B has low death rates and is moderately easy to transmit. In Category C are agents that have the potential for mass harm. These agents can be absorbed through the skin, ingested, or inhaled, as for the sarin gas. One of the ways the government has responded to bioterrorism is through the Chemical and Biological Weapons Control Act, which allows the government to address groups or people who threaten to attempt or develop biological weapons. The CDC has also published a preparedness plan which addresses the general public, medical practitioners, and emergency workers.
Sovereign wealth funds manage and invest in various financial assets to achieve a financial objective. Funds are established for imbalance of payment surpluses, foreign currency reserves, the proceeds of privatization, governmental transfer payments, and fiscal surpluses. The funds are financed by exporting commodities as well as non-commodities. Sovereign wealth funds' objectives help future generations and focus on long-term capital growth of selected countries. The funds prevent high volatility in revenues and stabilize the economy. They dissipate unwanted liquidity, fund social and economical development, and accumulate profit for the benefit of the nation's economy and its citizens. Interest in sovereign wealth funds grows as countries expand their currency reserves and look for ways to enlarge their reserve portfolios and gain greater returns. From the start of 2008 till the end of 2012, sovereign wealth fund assets grew by 59%. From 2005 to 2012, at least 40 sovereign wealth funds were established.
What is a nanohazard? Nano is something that is small, at a 1/1,000,000th ratio. It is microscopic and at the level of atoms. A hazard is something that poses a risk or a danger. A nanohazard is not a small risk. Rather, it is an object or objects at a microscopic level that poses a risk. Nanohazards are created by nanotechnology, an ongoing market that changes matter at a molecular level, which may cause different unique properties. Governments have not yet created nano-regulation, and nanohazards have not yet been safety tested or characterized, although they may pose a great risk to the worker and the workplace. The nanotechnology market is constantly growing, and this billion-dollar industry has not received nearly enough study for its market. Due to the small nature of nanotechnology, the products may be more toxic and unstable, and a larger surface area may be affected. As the market for nanotechnology continually grows, there must be a consistent guide for the hazards of nanotechnology.
Leapfrogging in this context stands for the rapid development of underdeveloped or developing countries with the adoption of new technology without going through its developing process. The dominant leading leapfrog wireless communication technology, aka LCTS, is wireless technology such as mobile phones, due to its reduced cost and user-friendly features. The adoption of LCTS in originally poor regions provides benefits to the local community by gaining people the access to medical and health services and facilitates local economic development for providing global marketplace and good price on crops, even helping with cattle management through GPS technology. However, there are also some potential negative impacts from the adoption of LCTS. Firstly, business already relied on the internet will collapse when the congestion occurs. Secondly, the investment in LCTS may override the provision of basic needs for the poor. Thirdly, the disparity in access to digital technology could cause a digital divide.
Co-opetition is the convergence of two or more business competitors in the hope of sharing common costs and to gain competitive advantages to boost one's own economic status and create higher values. Because co-opetition consists both collaboration and competition, companies will cooperate while remaining competitive in other areas. Co-opetition occurs at two levels. The inter-organizational level is a simultaneous collaboration and competition between two firms. On the other hand, the intra-organizational level is the co-opetition between individual employees or functional units within the same organization. The advantages of co-opetition includes cost reductions, resources complementarity, and technological transfer. The disadvantages includes equity and risk, trust, complementary needs, and distribution of control. A successful co-opetition interaction between two companies will require equal knowledge sharing as well as proper competitive intensity.
If you look around, you will notice that everything around you has been designed, whether it is the chair you're sitting in or the pen you write with. All of these things have been designed with the idea of creating an experience for the user. This mentality of creating an experience for the user is called user centricity, which is a form of designing centered around the experience of the user. User-centered design has a few guidelines. Designers must consult with potential users throughout the design process to see what will and will not work. They must also understand how users behave, how they will naturally be inclined to use the product, test and retest the design, and evaluate the involvement that the users will experience while using the product. The goal of user-centered design is to create an experience that will come naturally to users and will create an enjoyable interaction with the product with the minimal amount of effort required. For this to happen, the design must be intuitive, simple, and easy to follow, while still impacting the life of the user in a positive way.
Health tourism or medical tourism refers to people traveling abroad for the sole purpose of receiving healthcare treatment. The market of this recently popularized trend has been estimated to be growing at a rate of 15 to 25%. Factors influencing this growth are attributed to an increase in accessibility of information, lower transportation costs, and an increasingly affluent and aging population. Many factors motivate people to travel abroad for medical attention. Push factors being long wait times, high fees, a shortage of providers, procedures that are unavailable or illegal, and/or inadequate facilities. Pull factors being cheaper prices, specific services, and modern technologies and procedures. However, this increasing business has introduced new problems and risks. Universal healthcare facilities are faced with resource burdens of foreign travelers taking advantage of their policies, amongst other concerns of regulations. Additional major concerns to individuals are contracting a foreign infection, traveling during the recuperative period, and an inadequate or faulty blood supply. As always, being careful and well-informed is crucial when engaging in the rising trend of health tourism.
Starting from this decade, there's an ongoing trend that people tend to spend less time readying their meals and tend to have processed food instead, as they complain there's no time to cook themselves. This trend is causing humans to have problems and harm to the environment and unnoticeably supporting the processed food industry. The two kinds of convenience food that people usually consume are fast food and microwave food. It is very true it is easy to make and handy, however, it is very harmful to our body as it can lead us to obesity, heart diseases, and cancer. The ingredients are not fresh at all and some even add chemicals to increase the flavor of the food. In conclusion, we should always put health before convenience. If we are able to prepare food beforehand, it can always give ourselves convenience and eat healthier. It is always better to enjoy food without any distraction and communicate with others. Never let convenience stop us from having a healthy eating lifestyle and social life.
Ethical foods are the foods people choose to consume based on their moral principles and includes the consideration of the production and manufacturing process, as well as the distribution and preparation involved. The study of food ethics exhibits how social interaction, technology, and politics are external influences that affect people's decisions about what to eat. There are different types of ethical food choices based on people's values, and the 6 basic reasons for eating ethically are environmental protection, supporting animal rights, religion and culture, fair trade products, maintaining a healthy lifestyle, and situational diets due to geographical locations, and within these categories there are further arguments for eating ethical foods. Food companies have noticed the global population increase and are shifting their marketed products towards growing ethical food types. The rise of organic and fair trade food consumers are a direct response to the realization of the unjust acts of large corporations. The consumption of ethical foods are determined by a person's morals and values that change over time.
Hunger is still a huge problem that the world has to deal with today. Even though there's a surplus amount of food that is being produced each year, 1 out of 7 people in the world do not have access to it. Annually, the world throws away 1.3 billion tons of food into garbage or landfills. Well-developed countries have the privilege of peace and safety, allowing almost everyone access to food. But for many countries and places like the DRC and Israel, they have been plagued by war which disastrously impact their agriculture. Citizens often fall into the poverty trap where they are in a continuous cycle of poverty and hunger due to the fact that they are not strong enough to improve their lifestyle and wealthy enough to purchase food. The reason hunger still exists is not all influenced by cultural and political conflict. One of the main reasons hunger is prevalent today is because of the increasing amount of natural disasters. The areas impacted most in the world are Africa and Central Asia. It has become increasingly difficult to generate food that is accessible to the countries and places that need it most.
The past half-century has shown a dramatic decrease in farm labor. The mechanization of farm-based activities has allowed for inexpensive means to increase large-scale production of crops. However, energy shortages are a growing concern as a result of the machine-based culture on farmlands. In fact, agricultural practices are responsible for 14% of global greenhouse emissions. Farming practices are becoming less attractive as farmers have been consistently losing profitability, taking home only 90% of food shelf prices in 2006 compared to the 42% in 1951. The harvesting cycle degrades the agricultural land, and the unrestored land results in a lowered productive capacity and less profitability. For 93% of American farmers, their income from farmlands only make up 20% of their total earnings. If a farmer is unable to find other sources of income, they are forced to forfeit their agricultural land. Economic pressures within the agricultural industry have led to social tensions, and as a result, suicide rates for farmers have dramatically increased.
Obesity in the developing world can be seen as a result of changes in diet, physical activity, health, and nutrition. A recent study shows that the rate of overweight and obese population is related to wealth. As the country develops, percentage of obese population will be increasing. By 2013, 2.1 billion people, which is almost 29% of the world population, is overweight or obese. As the life standards of large developing countries such as India and China are getting better, more than a third of the world's population are changing their diet and eating habits. The chart shows the ratio of calories extracted from animal products including meat, fish, eggs, and dairy products among a few developing countries. The percentage of China and Brazil have a significant boost after the 1980s, while the demand for animal products in the world is also increasing gradually.
Since the end of World War II, farmers have used fertilizer to supply nutrients to crops. Half of food produced today is grown because of fertilizer. Out of the 3 primary nutrients, only potassium is naturally occurring and constantly recycled in the soil. The production of fertilizer as it is used today is not sustainable. The production of nitrogen uses large amounts of non-renewable resources and produces large amounts of greenhouse gases. Phosphorus is mined from the earth at an unsustainable rate, and only 15% of fertilizer applied to plants will actually be used. As the global population and demand for food increase, this problem is only going to get worse. Used together, these 2 solutions address the issues with nitrogen and phosphate production in chemical fertilizer. Cyanobacteria produces the nitrogen needed for fertilizers as a byproduct of photosynthesis. Mycorrhiza helps the plant absorb more phosphorus. Both methods can be tailored to suit local environments, and both methods are readily available to farmers globally.
Engineered seed is a genetically modified seed where the seed is added with a related gene, and this technology is called genetic modification, also called GM technology. The GM technology creates transgenic seeds containing genetic material from other species, usually from bacteria and viruses. The producers use GM technology because it expands breeding capability and accelerates crop development. The GM technology also increases growth rate and boosts crop nutrition and resilience. The graph in the corner shows a global increasing growth rate of crops with GM technology from 1996 to 2008. However, the genetic modification is bad because GM seeds requires chemical pesticides and fertilizers. Long-term impacts are also difficult to predict as GM crops can produce adverse health impact on both humans and livestock. Numerous countries now refuse to use GM technology.
Today we are faced with a problematic agricultural industry. Poor management of land and our resources and greenhouse gas emissions have negatively impacted the environment. By 2050, the world population will reach 9 billion. Increased urbanization means less land for farming. We risk not meeting the needs of the future. Hydroponic systems could be a solution to our farming problem. Plants grow in a steady supply of fertilized water instead of soil. The indoor environment is climate controlled, which permits growth year-round. It is applied to large greenhouse skyscrapers called vertical farms, as well as aquaponics when combined with fish farms. Farming is now possible in areas with restrictive climate or landscape. Due to the reduced distance from farm to table and less contact with chemicals, the crop is better quality. However, it lacks the nutrients that soil would provide. The process is demanding and still consumes a lot of energy, but all in all, this is a good adaptation to our changing environment.
1/3 of all food produced worldwide is wasted. In Canada, this equates to $31 billion of food waste every year. That's more than the total economic output of the world's poorest 29 countries combined. However, the true cost of food waste is actually closer to $90 billion a year when we factor in energy, water, and other resources required for food production. Food waste is mainly the result of overgrowing, picky consumers, excessive purchasing, and the premature disposal of food. In the US, organic waste is the second biggest contributor to landfills, and as a result, landfills are the largest source of methane emissions. However, France recently became the first country in the world that requires grocery stores to donate unsold food to charities instead of throwing it out. Food waste is being reduced through online marketplaces for leftovers, automated waste tracking and coaching for restaurants and hospitals, as well as through discounts on imperfect produce. In addition, multiple companies are transforming food waste into fertilizer and using anaerobic digestion to capture methane that can be used for fuel in cars and homes.
Livestock.
Presently, the world's farm animals consume the equivalent amount of food as an additional 2 billion people. Furthermore, livestock population increases by 3% each year. By 2050, livestock will consume as much food as the human population in 1970. To produce a small amount of meat and dairy, more weight and natural resources get exhausted. This results in about 30% of the Earth's land surface being used for livestock. According to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, farm animals produce 18% of all human CO2 emissions and accounts for 37% of all human-induced methane. Livestock farming is a major driver of land degradation and deforestation. As livestock accounts for 20% of all terrestrial biomass, it is a very urgent issue. Suggested by the LEAD, methods such as soil conservation and controlling livestock from sensitive areas may reduce further environmental damage. Animal dietary improvements and manure recycling may also reduce methane and natural resource depletion.
Soil depletion is an ongoing issue in our world today and is the root cause of the loss in nutrients in our food, mainly caused by soil erosion, which has caused 40% of the soil nutrient loss. As erosion removes the soil, it removes the nutrients that come with it. The soil removed by erosion contains 3 times more nutrients than the soil that stays. As shown in the table, many of the net mineral contents have declined from 1963 to 1999. Studies of different vegetables and different time periods by Donald Davis and his team at University of Texas, as well as Kutztown Institute and British Nutrient Data, have proven the decline in nutrients such as protein, calcium, iron, riboflavin, vitamin C, and potassium. If soil depletion continues as it does now, we will not only lose more nutrients but also arable land and cause desertification, pollution, and flooding. We cannot immediately change the land back to what it used to be, but small decisions such as buying locally and organic without using pesticides or fertilizers can go a long way to help preserve our environment for the future.
It should not be a surprise that more is spent eating out than on groceries in America, where roughly half of the restaurant spending is on fast food. The industry flourishes due to consumers' choice of unhealthy lifestyles, thus the economy will deteriorate due to the increase of taxes used to fund the growing population that cannot afford to treat the illnesses of obesity. The prices of goods will also multiply, putting more people in debt, which gives them even more reason to purchase convenient foods. Consequently, this will worsen the dilemma of being overweight by upsurging the percentage of people struggling to receive medical attention. It is a downward spiral for society as people invest in an industry that will ultimately destroy their economy. Although fast food industries provide jobs to millions, it is often overlooked that these are unskilled workers receiving minimal wage. Yes, low salary is better than no income at all. However, these individuals are not even making enough to support themselves. Being less worse doesn't make it good because the existing poverty still impedes economic advancements, especially if approximately 3.5 million people are currently employed in this rapidly growing industry.
Food labeling remains vital in separating the gap between the consumer and the product being consumed through the most direct means possible. By regulating the nutritional content supplied from the manufacturer, such as allergy warnings and ingredient specifications, the consumer can make informed decisions on what products are safe, ethical, and healthy for them to consume. For Americans, the benefits of labeling imply lower healthcare costs related to heart disease and cancer, the 2 largest public health problems in the country. On the negatives, mandatory food labeling requires higher production costs and food prices to enforce regulation standards. The controversy circulating around food labels lies in measuring the health benefits, as they become obscured by other factors such as the lack of exercise. Aside from the content provided on labels, consumers still remain largely unaware of their own intake. A survey conducted in the 2004 National Survey showed that Americans were most interested in having labels stating the use of pesticides and genetically modified ingredients. At the time, only 1/3 of them were even aware that they consumed genetically modified food.